Healing doesn't start with effort. It starts with honesty. Most people think healing begins with action, doing something, fixing something, changing something, becoming something better, stronger, more in control. But that's not where it starts. Because before anything can change, something has to be seen, clearly, honestly, without distortion, without excuses, without running away. And that is where most people struggle, not with healing itself, but with seeing what is actually there, not what they wish was there, not what they pretend is there, but what is real. Because reality is uncomfortable. It doesn't always match the image you have of yourself. It doesn't always feel good. It doesn't protect your ego. It challenges it. And that's why denial exists, not as weakness, but as protection, a way to avoid something that feels too difficult to face, too painful to accept, too disruptive to your sense of identity. So instead of facing it, you adjust the story. You minimize it. It's not that bad. Everyone goes through this. I'm fine. You rationalize it. It happened for a reason. I had no choice. It's just how things are. You deflect it. Blame something else. Someone else. Circumstances. Timing. Anything but yourself. And slowly, you create a version of reality that feels safer, more manageable, less threatening, but also less true. Because the truth is still there, unchanged, unseen, waiting. According to Carl Jung, what is denied does not disappear. It remains in the unconscious. And what remains unconscious controls you, quietly, subtly, without you realizing it. Because you cannot change what you refuse to see. You cannot heal what you pretend is not there. And denial keeps things hidden, not just from others, but from yourself. You avoid certain thoughts, certain memories, certain emotions. You don't go there. You stay on the surface, busy, distracted, focused on everything else. Because going deeper feels uncertain, unstable, like you might find something you don't want to deal with. So you stay where it feels safe, where things make sense, where your identity stays intact. But that safety comes at a cost, because what you avoid doesn't disappear. It builds, it accumulates, it influences how you think, how you react, how you see yourself and others. It shapes your patterns, your habits, your relationships, without you even realizing it. You repeat the same mistakes, the same dynamics, the same emotional responses, and you don't always understand why, because the cause is hidden, buried beneath layers of denial. And as long as it stays hidden, it stays active, because the mind doesn't resolve what it doesn't face. It carries it until it is acknowledged, until it is seen. And this is where healing truly begins. Not with action, not with change, but with awareness. Raw, unfiltered, sometimes uncomfortable awareness. The willingness to look at yourself without filters, without defense, without pretending. And that is not easy, because it means seeing parts of yourself you may not like, patterns you've been repeating, choices you've been avoiding responsibility for, emotions you've been suppressing. It means admitting, I'm not as in control as I thought. I've been avoiding this. I've been lying to myself in small ways. And that kind of honesty feels threatening at first, because it disrupts your self-image. It challenges the version of yourself you've been holding on to. But it also does something else. It creates clarity, because once something is seen clearly, it can no longer hide. It can no longer operate in the background, unnoticed. And that changes everything, because now you are aware. You see the pattern. You recognize the behavior. You understand the reaction. And awareness breaks the illusion. It removes the distortion. It brings you back to reality, not the comfortable version, but the true version. And truth is where change becomes possible. Because once you see something clearly, you have a choice to continue it or to change it. But without that awareness, there is no choice, only repetition, only automatic behavior, driven by something you don't fully understand. And this is why denial is so powerful, because it removes that choice. It keeps you stuck. Not because you can't change, but because you don't see what needs to change. And as long as you don't see it, you can't touch it. You can't question it. You can't transform it. You can only live through it. Again and again and again until something breaks, until something forces you to look, to face what you've been avoiding. And sometimes that comes through pain, through loss, through patterns that no longer work. Moments where your usual way of coping fails, and you are left with no distraction, no explanation, no escape, just the truth, right in front of you. And in that moment, you have a choice to turn away again, or to finally look, to stay, to face it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it shakes you, because that moment is the beginning, not of comfort, but of real healing. Because healing does not begin when things feel good. It begins when things become clear, when denial ends, and truth begins. And that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is what sets everything in motion. Because now, you are no longer hiding. You are no longer pretending. You are seeing. And once you truly see, you cannot go back to not knowing. You cannot go back to the same unconscious pattern. Because awareness changes your relationship to everything, to your thoughts, your behaviors, your emotions, your choices. And that is where healing starts. Not in perfection, not in control, but in honesty. The kind of honesty that doesn't protect you, but frees you, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's difficult, because it is real. And reality is the only place where change can actually happen. Denial is not always obvious. It doesn't always look like lying or pretending everything is perfect. Most of the time, it's subtle, quiet, almost invisible. You can be in denial and still believe you're being honest. Because denial doesn't remove reality. It reshapes it just enough so you don't have to fully feel it. You don't have to fully face it. You tell yourself, I've moved on, but something in you still reacts, still tightens, still remembers. You say, it doesn't bother me, but your behavior says something else. You avoid certain conversations, certain places, certain people. You say, I'm fine, but you stay busy all the time. You fill your space. You distract yourself because slowing down would bring something up. And that's the nature of denial. It's not always about what you say. It's about what you avoid, what you don't look at directly, what you keep just outside your awareness. Because fully seeing it would change something. It would force you to confront a truth. And that truth might require action, responsibility, letting go, changing direction. And that is uncomfortable. So instead, you stay where you are. You keep the story the same, even if it doesn't fully match reality, because it feels safer, more stable, more predictable. But underneath that stability, there is tension, a subtle inconsistency between what you say is true and what you actually feel. And that tension doesn't disappear. It shows up in small ways, in reactions that seem too strong, in emotions that don't fully make sense, in patterns you keep repeating without understanding why. Because the root is still hidden. According to Carl Jung, the unconscious influences your life until you make it conscious. And when something is denied, it remains unconscious, active, influential, even if you don't see it. And this is why denial is not harmless. It doesn't just protect you, it also limits you, because it keeps you disconnected from parts of yourself, from your own truth, from your own experience. You only see what feels safe to see. You only acknowledge what fits your current identity. And anything that challenges that gets pushed away, ignored, reframed, minimized. But the more you do that, the more divided you become internally. One part of you knows something is not right. Another part keeps pretending it is. And that internal conflict creates confusion, creates stress, creates a constant sense of unease. Because you are not aligned with yourself. You are split between what is true and what you allow yourself to see. And that split is exhausting, even if you don't fully realize it. Because maintaining denial takes energy. It takes effort to keep things out of awareness, to keep the story consistent, to avoid certain thoughts, to redirect your attention again and again and again. And over time, that becomes your normal, living slightly disconnected, slightly out of sync with yourself, but still functioning, still moving, still appearing fine on the surface. And this is where many people stay for a long time, because nothing is breaking completely. Nothing is forcing them to look deeper. So they continue, repeating the same patterns, having the same experiences, feeling the same underlying tension, without fully understanding why. And this is the cost of denial. Not immediate destruction, but long-term stagnation. You don't move forward because you're not facing what's holding you back. You don't change because you're not seeing what needs to change. You don't heal because you're not acknowledging what is still unresolved. And this is why awareness is so important. Because awareness breaks denial. It brings what was hidden into the light, not all at once, but gradually, piece by piece, moment by moment. You begin to notice things, small inconsistencies, reactions that don't match the situation, feelings that seem disproportionate, patterns that repeat. And instead of ignoring them, you pause, you question, you look a little closer. And that curiosity is the beginning of honesty. Not forced, not overwhelming, but intentional. You allow yourself to see a little more, to feel a little more, to admit a little more, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it challenges how you see yourself. Because you understand something now. Avoiding it doesn't remove it. It only delays it. And the longer it is delayed, the more it shapes your life from the background. So you start turning toward it, gently, without judgment, without rushing. You don't force everything to the surface at once. You allow it to come naturally as you create space, as you become more present, as you become more aware. And when something comes up, you don't push it away immediately. You stay with it. You notice it. You try to understand it. What is this feeling? Where does it come from? What is it connected to? And sometimes, the answers are not clear right away, but the process itself matters. Because you are no longer avoiding. You are engaging. You are opening a door that has been closed for a long time. And through that door comes truth. Not always comfortable, not always easy, but real. And that reality is what begins to dissolve the denial. Because once something is seen clearly, it cannot be unseen. It cannot return to the same hidden state. It becomes part of your awareness, part of your understanding. And that changes how you respond, how you think, how you act. Because now, you are not operating from a limited version of reality. You are operating from something deeper, something more accurate. And that is where healing gains momentum. Not through force, not through control, but through truth. Because truth aligns you with yourself, removes the internal split, closes the gap between what you feel and what you acknowledge. And that alignment creates stability, real stability, not the fragile kind built on avoidance, but the grounded kind built on awareness. And from that place, change becomes possible, real change, not temporary adjustments, but deep transformation. Because you are no longer working around the problem, you are working with it, facing it, understanding it, integrating it. And that is what moves you forward. Not perfection, not having everything figured out, but being honest enough to see what is actually there. And that honesty is what ends denial and begins healing. When denial starts to fall away, you don't feel relief immediately. You feel exposure, like something has been uncovered, something you can no longer ignore. And that can feel unsettling, because what was once hidden is now visible, clear, present, and there is no easy way around it. You see the pattern. You recognize the behavior. You understand the role you played. And that realization carries weight, not because it is wrong, but because it is real. And reality requires responsibility, not blame, but ownership. The willingness to say, this is mine. This is part of me. This is something I've been avoiding. And that is where most people hesitate. Because ownership feels heavy. It removes the distance, the ability to point elsewhere, the comfort of saying, "It's not me." But at the same time, it gives you something you didn't have before: power. Because what you own, you can change. What you acknowledge, you can work with. But what you deny controls you, without resistance, without awareness. And this is the shift from unconscious living to conscious awareness, from reacting automatically to seeing clearly. And once that shift begins, you start to notice more, not just the obvious things, but the subtle patterns, the small reactions, the moments where you pull away, where you avoid, where you distort the truth slightly to make it easier to hold. You notice how quickly your mind tries to protect you, how it reframes things, just enough to keep you comfortable, just enough to avoid discomfort. And this is where awareness deepens, because now you are not just seeing the big picture, you are seeing the process. In real time, you catch yourself mid-thought, mid-reaction, mid-avoidance, and that awareness creates a pause, a space between what you feel and what you usually do. And in that space, you have a choice: to continue the old pattern or to stay present, to face what is actually there, even if it feels uncomfortable. And this is where the real work happens, not in dramatic change, but in small moments, repeated consistently. You notice the urge to dismiss something, to say, "It's not important." But instead of moving away, you stay. You look at it. You ask, "Why does this bother me? What is underneath this?" And those questions begin to reveal something deeper. Not always immediately, but gradually. You begin to see connections between your past experiences and your current reactions, between what you felt then and what you feel now. And that creates understanding, because now your behavior is no longer random. It has context. It has meaning. It makes sense, even if you don't like it, even if it's uncomfortable to admit. And this is where compassion begins to emerge, not as an excuse, but as understanding. You see why you avoided certain things, why you denied certain truths, why you protected yourself in the way you did. Because at some point, it served a purpose. It helped you cope. It helped you manage something you were not ready to face. And recognizing that changes how you see yourself, not as broken, not as flawed, but as someone who adapted, someone who found a way, even if it was not perfect, even if it created new problems later. And that perspective creates space, space to grow, space to change, without harsh judgment, without constant self-criticism, because judgment keeps you stuck. It pushes things back into denial, back into avoidance. But understanding keeps things in awareness, where they can be worked through, where they can be integrated. And this is where the process becomes deeper, because now you are not just noticing patterns, you are working with them. You are staying with the discomfort. Instead of escaping it, you are allowing yourself to feel what you have been avoiding. And that is not easy, because those feelings were avoided for a reason. They carry weight, they carry history. But when you face them consciously, something changes. They begin to move. They begin to shift, because they are no longer being suppressed. They are being experienced. And experienced emotion does not stay stuck in the same way. It flows. It evolves. It resolves over time. And this is how healing actually happens, not by removing discomfort, but by allowing it to be processed fully, honestly, without interruption, without denial. And as you continue this process, you begin to feel more aligned, less divided, less conflicted internally, because you are no longer pushing parts of yourself away. You are bringing them into awareness, into understanding, into integration. And that integration creates stability, a sense of being grounded, not because everything is perfect, but because everything is acknowledged. Nothing is being ignored. Nothing is being hidden. And from that place, your choices begin to change. Naturally, you respond differently, not because you force yourself to, but because you see more clearly now. You understand what drives you, what triggers you, what patterns you fall into. And that understanding guides your actions in a way that feels more intentional, more aligned. And this is where transformation becomes real, not surface level, not temporary, but deep, because it is rooted in awareness, in truth, in the willingness to face what is there, instead of avoiding it. And this is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke about the shadow, the parts of yourself you do not want to see, the parts you deny, ignore, reject. But those parts do not disappear. They influence you until you bring them into awareness, until you face them, understand them, integrate them. And that process is what transforms you, not into someone new, but into someone whole, because you are no longer divided between what you show and what you hide. You are integrated, aware, present, and that is where real healing lives, not in perfection, but in wholeness, the willingness to see all of yourself, even the parts you once avoided, and stay, without turning away, without going back into denial, because now you understand something deeper, that what you face no longer controls you, and what you integrate becomes part of your strength, not your weakness. And that is the shift from denial to awareness, from avoidance to integration, from fragmentation to wholeness. And that is where healing truly begins to take form. Healing becomes real when honesty turns into action, not forced action, not dramatic change, but quiet shifts in how you respond, in how you show up, in how you relate to yourself. Because once denial is gone, you can't go back to pretending. You see too much. You understand too much. And that awareness starts to influence everything. The way you speak to yourself, the way you make decisions, the way you handle discomfort. You notice when you're about to avoid something, when you're about to fall back into old patterns, when you're about to tell yourself a story that isn't fully true. And instead of following it automatically, you pause, even for a moment. And that moment changes the direction, because now you're not reacting blindly. You're choosing. You're aware. And awareness creates responsibility, not in a heavy way, but in a real way. You begin to see that you have a role in your patterns, in your reactions, in your life. Not everything is in your control, but your awareness is. Your response is. Your willingness to be honest is. And that is where your power is. Because once you take responsibility, you stop waiting for things to change, waiting for people to change, waiting for the perfect moment. You start acting from clarity, from understanding, from truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's unfamiliar, because you know something now. Avoiding it will only take you back into the same patterns, the same cycles, the same outcomes. So you begin to choose differently, not perfectly, but intentionally. You set boundaries, even when it feels difficult. You speak honestly, even when it feels uncomfortable. You step away from things that no longer align with you, even when it creates uncertainty, because you are no longer protecting the illusion. You are living in reality, and reality requires change. It asks you to let go of what no longer fits, of what no longer serves you, of what was built on denial. And letting go is not easy, because it often involves loss of familiarity, loss of comfort, loss of the version of yourself you've been holding on to. But that loss creates space for something more real, more aligned, more true to who you are now. And that is where growth happens, not in holding on, but in releasing what is no longer true. And this process is not linear. There will be moments where you fall back, where you avoid again, where you slip into old patterns. But the difference now is awareness. You see it. You recognize it. You don't stay there as long. You return to honesty, faster, more consciously. And that is progress, not perfection, but awareness in motion, applied, repeated, strengthened over time. And as you continue, something inside you stabilizes. You feel more grounded, more connected to yourself, less divided, because you are no longer hiding from parts of yourself. You are including them, understanding them, working with them. And that creates trust in yourself, because you know You won't avoid what matters. You won't ignore what needs attention. You will face it, even if it's difficult. And that trust changes how you move through life. You rely less on external validation, less on distraction, less on avoidance, because you are anchored internally, in awareness, in truth, in honesty. And this is what Carl Jung pointed toward. Not a life without difficulty, but a life where you are not controlled by what you refuse to see. A life where you face yourself fully, honestly, without distortion. Because when you do that, something powerful happens. The things that once controlled you lose their grip. The patterns that once repeated begin to change. The emotions that once overwhelmed you become something you can hold, understand, move through. And that is freedom, not the absence of struggle, but the absence of denial. Because denial keeps you stuck. It keeps you blind. It keeps you repeating. But truth, even when it's uncomfortable, moves you forward. It aligns you. It grounds you. It gives you a clear place to stand. And from that place, you can build something real, not based on illusion, not based on avoidance, but based on who you actually are, what you actually feel, what you actually need. And that is where healing becomes complete. Not perfect, but real, because you are no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer pretending. You are present, aware, engaged with yourself. And that is what it means to truly heal, not to become someone else, but to finally stop denying who you've been all along. If this made you uncomfortable, that's a good sign, because discomfort is where denial starts to crack. And according to Carl Jung, what you refuse to face will control you. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. What truth are you avoiding right now? Not later, not someday, right now. Because the longer you avoid it, the longer it shapes your life from the shadows. The same patterns, the same cycles, the same results. So don't run from it this time. Pause. Be honest. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it challenges how you see yourself. Because that moment of honesty is where healing begins. If you're ready to stop living in denial and start understanding yourself on a deeper level, subscribe. Because this isn't about becoming someone new. It's about finally facing who you've been avoiding.